I'm Jeff Pospisil, the 10-Minute Treasurer with practical advice for improving your church's financial future. In this video, I'm going to talk about how a church should get the money from the offering plate counted and into the bank. So I think there's a few things that could start off with a book of discipline. I normally don't lean too much on the book of discipline, but they do have some good sound advice here. Um, First of all, so the first thing is you want at least two people. You should never have a solo counter because that sets you up for accusation. People could say, hey, the offering's short, and Janice is the one that always counts it by herself, and Janice is driving a new vehicle. Even if Janice never stole anything, there's room for accusation when it's only one person. So you want at least two people. And again, they should not be part of the same immediate family in the same household because a husband and wife, there's more likely of them colluding than two people that are unrelated. So you got, yeah, there's just much less likelihood of collusion if it's two people not in the same household. So, and the result of the counting should be a record of all funds received. So there needs to be a result, and that should be a record that shows who gave, how much, and if there was any designation. So who gave, how much, and any designation, and the date of the counting or of the service. And that section from the Book of Discipline continues, and there's one sentence here that you should be aware of. And that's that the money needs to be deposited promptly. And what promptly means from church to church might vary, but that's set by the finance committee. So we'll have some churches, like I remember there was a church in Minot that said they have to be deposited and accounted and deposited right after the service because there was a number of church break-ins in that area at that time. And the money, if they left it overnight, there was a higher than normal probability that it could get taken. So for them, prompt was right after the service. For a lot of churches, it's probably maybe the next Monday or, the next open day for the office might be prompt. And here's what it actually looks like for especially many churches with multiple services or larger churches is after the offering is taken and you have the offering plate, two people walk it back to whatever the secure location is. So if there's a safe or a lockbox or whatever it is, somewhere in the office, usually with limited access to it, two people go there. So two people, because that not only protects the integrity of the individual, but if there's a slight chance that, if there's one person, they can be more easily overpowered and the offering could be taken than if there were two people. So anyway, that's the reasoning for why you'd always want two people to bring that offering there. For many of our churches, though, it's safe enough to just leave it on the altar. So they bring it forward, they place it on the altar, and it stays up there. And then right after the service is when the designated people come and they gather it, and then they bring it to whatever the secure location is. Again, it's usually two people. It should be at least two people that gather it and bring it to whatever the secure location is. So then when it's time to count the offering, whether it's right after the service or sometime in the near future, you need at least two people. They should go to a room that's reasonably secure and private. And they basically you dump it out on the table and then you sort everything out. So you would sort out um, the cash and then put it in its specific denominations. You'd sort out the checks. If you have envelopes, you would sort those. You would open the envelopes and make sure that whatever's written on them agrees. If nothing's written on them, you might add the amount that was there. That's not a bad idea. So, but you sort everything out. And then there's a couple of ways to actually go through keeping the record of who gave what for whom. So it used to be pretty common for churches to use an envelope system to keep track of donations and donors. And the beginning of every year, a family would get a box of envelopes with your envelope number on it that identified you, and you'd use that whenever you made a donation. And a lot of times they'd even set up their electronic giving to also include the envelope number. Um, Not a bad system, and it is a good way if you use it to make your record of donations. So uh, if they, for all the envelopes, you just double check that what's inside agrees with what's written on it. If you have any checks that you receive that don't have an envelope, you just make out an envelope form and fill out the appropriate information. Also, even if you have loose offering would you'd write and make up an envelope for that loose offering, and then the amount that was there, and then you would keep all these, and then you'd use that to make your counter report, which I'll talk about later. Yet many churches, even if they have the envelope system, a lot of times they also have one of these ledger accounts. This is just standard ledger paper. You can probably pick it up at any office supply store or Walmart or whatever. And you would just list on here, here's the funds that people gave to, the general fund and the missions fund, and they gave it on September 13th was the day of this service. And then you just go down the list and you make, okay, Jack Jones gave 25 bucks to general fund, Jeff Pospisil 75 bucks to general fund, Edna, blah, 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 and just so on and so forth. You list them all out, you total them, and then that's your list that would go to the financial secretary to enter it into the computer, or if they have that, or to be at least the record. So if anybody needed a tax receipt, they would look at these reports in order to get that. So if it's not in a computer, some churches will have the counters enter it right in the computer. You know, um, that depends on a lot of things. Sometimes that ends up being more work than what it's worth, and it's just easier to give them a ledger paper like this. So that was to get the donor records ready, and then here's to get the deposit all the way ready. So you count up the coins, the denominations of bills, the checks. What you normally do is one person counts it and they write it down, and then somebody double checks it. And then if it's checks, you normally add them up separately. Make sure your totals agree. So especially it's easy for if you got a lot of cash or a lot of checks, it's easy to make a mistake. So it's nice to have one person count it and then the next one count it again and compare your totals that they agree. The next thing that's important is you want to compare the total of the cash and checks to what the total from the donor. So whether it's the journal, the ledger that you use, and you just compare that total to the deposit total, or if you have an envelopes, you would want to add all those up and compare that total to the deposit total. So those should agree. If they don't, you got to look in and see where there is a discrepancy. So while the ledger sheet or the stack of envelopes will work great for your financial secretary to keep the donor records up to date, um, chances are your treasurer or bookkeeper doesn't want to see how much everybody's giving. They don't need that information in order to record the deposit correctly. So you'd want to fill out a report like this, and I'll make this template. It's in Excel, available for you so you can update it. But what I do is, you can put I would print out a number of copies for the counters, and then they would fill this out. So they'd enter the date, they'd fill out this part for the things that are in the budget, if there's any memorial gifts or special offerings, and I used to update these. I don't know if it's quarterly, but probably at least twice a year, I'd update these for um, what people are giving to most often. And then there's some spaces for some other stuff that I didn't know about. And then they would do the total of coins, currency, and checks, and the total deposit. And then there's that space at the very bottom. And this is important for auditors, is that who counted it should sign off on it. So whoever counted it should sign off on it to show that there was at least two people, not from the same household, that counted it. And after that's complete, the deposit slip should be filled out. I normally don't like listing all the checks and everything. I might list the amount of cash, and then for the checks, I would just use my tape from my adding machine, and that should be good enough. But I'm not going to list them all out, and then put the total in there. And the last thing that I strongly encourage churches to do is to get a lock bag. I would talk to your bank about it, or you can also order them online. But it just provides a level of assurance and comfort to know that you put the deposit in there and the deposit slip, you zip it up, and you lock it. And it just protects everybody's integrity. Uh, Probably provides a small amount of additional assurance against theft, and then the person can either drop it off, and you really don't need two people anymore at this time, but either bring it to the bank during business hours or drop it in the night drop box, and then you're done. And if you do get the deposit receipt, I like to always give that to the treasurer or the bookkeeper too, and that then that verifies that the counter report was accurate. All right, that's all I have. Hopefully this was a blessing to you. If it was, I encourage you to like, share, subscribe. And again, this is a ministry of the Finance Office, the Dakotas Conference, as well as the Dakotas United Methodist Foundation. Blessings.